C6 Corvette passed the initial sniff test, I was able to identify a couple of issues prior to purchase, which I was able to leverage in order to get an excellent deal. The paint and body were in great shape, the interior was nearly perfect, and the engine bay was quite clean, which can be a telltale sign of how well the car was taken care of overall. And being a Grand Sport, it looked so good. The real shakedown, however, occurred on my 3-hour ride home, and a couple of things did come to my attention. And once I got it home into the garage, my list of issues grew. The notorious target top squeak became apparent immediately. This seems to be an issue that can't be fixed permanently, but I think we have a resolution to it. Oh, I just have a tire here. There are torque specs available for these, so take a look at that. We'll get some grease down in these little slots. This is good to have too in the garage or around the house. It's good for wooden doors that are sort of rubbing on each other and creaking. I pulled the target top off. I moisturized all of the rubber seals and gaskets. We put some lubrication in the mounting points, made sure the pins were tightened down properly, and reinstalled the Targa. With that, the squeak essentially went away. Now it did come back after a month or two, but then I just redid the process. You know, re-cleaned the seals, re-moisturized everything, put lubrication in the points where it needed to be applied, and the squeak again went away. And it seemed to last longer than it did the first time. So I think the more often we do this with our target tops, the more likely we are to all but eliminate that problem. Issues that seemed a little bit more worrisome than the others was that after a couple of spirited drives in the C6, I noticed a ticking noise coming from the top side of the engine. From the passenger side valve cover is where I noticed it the most. So the only thing I could think to do was try to identify it.
I've been hearing like a little chirp noise that I'm not certain of. My fear is that it's lifter going bad, but I don't know. A lot of people, the oil hasn't been changed forever, so that very well could be the problem.
I pulled the valve cover off. I felt around to see if I felt anything out of the ordinary. While the valve cover was off, I had my wife start the car up, see if I noticed anything unusual, like a spring being compressed out of synchronization with the other springs, see if I could identify any weird noises or where that particular ticking noise might be coming from. And honestly, nothing stood out.
Okay. Tight, nothing. Tight, nothing.
So we're going to try to start with some of the more inexpensive things first. We sealed everything back up. While we're in there, cleaned everything, cleaned the valve covers off, cleaned the cylinder heads off, made it sure everything was all sealed back up and free of leaks. And we're going to change the oil.
Removal tools are always helpful. Oh,
the dry sump system in the Grand Sport requires 11 quarts of oil and a little bit of a process to make sure you have the oil level correct, which includes getting that engine up to proper temperature before you check. But we went through it, had a little mishap with dropping the oil filter and spilling oil all over the floor, but hey, first oil change in a Corvette, and that was before we had the QuickJacks, which makes working on a Corvette much more easy and enjoyable. I will say QuickJacks are worth every single bit of the money. But that's neither here nor there. After the first oil change, I am proud to say that that ticking noise in the LS3 went away. It just needed some fresh oil. I used Mobil 1 in the Corvette. I'm not sure what everyone else recommends, but I know, again, coming from the VQ platform, which has a tendency to be a really noisy engine, Mobil 1 was really the only oil that I found that quieted that engine down. So I tried it out in the Corvette, and luckily we had some success. With the ticking noise from the engine all ironed out, the squeaking noise from the belt was driving me insane.
definitely a belt.
This happened all of the time, but even more so at cold start. Once the belt seemed to warm up a little bit, it must have got a little bit more grip on the pulleys and the squeaking went away. But firing a Corvette up that looks so good and then having it chirp and squeak like that, that's so annoying. I put a new belt and a new tensioner on, and that seemed to help, but only for a day or two. And upon closer inspection, I started finding rubber residue built up around the alternator bracket and up on the wheel well. And that was a little bit of a problem. It turns out that the pulley on the alternator was bad, causing the belt to slip. The pulley being bad was causing too much resistance, so even though the belt was tight, the pulley wasn't wanting to rotate as freely as it should, causing the belt to spin on it and causing that chirping noise, and which is why we were getting the residue. If I was accelerating hard, we were really putting a lot of tension on that belt and at high RPM, which was essentially causing it to do a burnout on the alternator pulley. So I had to swap the alternator out, but that caused a whole new problem of its own. A little concerned now, testing out the alternator. Seems pretty quiet. Doesn't seem to be dragging or anything either. But you just never know. At high RPM, it could be a totally different story, so. Sounds pretty quiet to me. Alternators for these cars are not cheap. So I went the inexpensive route. I got an OEM refurbished alternator. But the problem I was having is that the car didn't like the voltage reading. Now, if I took the alternator in and had it tested, and it tested within spec, but the problem is not with the alternator itself being out of spec, because it is. The problem is that the Corvette is so sensitive to voltage that even a slight variation, and the cool thing about the Corvette is that you can see the digital readout on the dash, so you can see that swing. It might be 15.2 down to 14.7 to 14.9 to 13.9. And again, it will test within spec, but it is too much of a swing to where the car really doesn't like it. So I bit the bullet, pulled that out, returned it, and just bought a brand new OEM alternator, and that worked. The problem is that these refurbished alternators, or these cheaper aftermarket alternators, the voltage regulator on them does not hold a tight enough tolerance to satisfy the Corvette. So you really, if you're replacing the alternator, you really have to get a brand new OEM alternator for these things. Although it's just completely aesthetic and totally personal preference, I had to lower the stance of this thing. Fortunately, this can be done for free by utilizing the stock lowering bolts. It's a pretty simple process, front and rear, and you can bring the car down almost to a reasonable ride height. Crazy thing about the Corvettes that's always gotten me, particularly the C5 and the C6 Corvette, is that although they sit really low, there's always a lot of wheel gap. I don't know why they did that, but using the stock lowering bolts to bring that center of gravity down, it really makes the car look a lot better, and although it might only be a temporary fix, it satisfied me for a short length of time. Another issue that really sort of gave me a bit of anxiety, and I mentioned it in a previous video, was that if I was accelerating more than half throttle and I tried to go speedily from 4th into 5th gear, there was a little bit of a grind or a little bit of a hang up that I didn't like. Again, I was hoping very much that this was not a sign of a failing transmission, because, you know, who wants to buy a car, spend a pretty good amount of money on a nice car, but then have to replace the transmission almost immediately after getting it? Not me. Certainly not me. So my feeling was that based on some of the condition of some of the other components of this car, that the transmission fluid probably had not been changed, and probably the rear gear fluid either. So again, back to what I said about finding the ticking noise from the engine. Let's start with the least expensive things first and change that transmission fluid. I was right. Both the rear gear fluid and the transmission fluid looked horrendous in this car. Some AMSOIL ATF for the transmission. Yes, automatic transmission fluid, as long as it is from AMSOIL, will work in the 6-speed manual transmission of the Corvette, C5 and C6. And I used the little royal purple rear gear, geez Louise, royal purple rear gear fluid in the rear end. Made a night and day difference, relatively easy process, made very easy if you utilize QuickJacks. I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested. But that made a night and day difference in how the car felt on the road and how it shifted. Buttery smooth through all of the years, no complaints after a simple fluid change. The final, but arguably one of the most important upgrades or issues I addressed on the C6 Grand Sport was the tires.
I've been looking forward to burning these things off the car for weeks, but got home last night late. I did not have an opportunity to do it. I'm just kind of inspecting these tires. Looks like the car was driven through a damn construction zone or something. A bunch of different little chunks of metal sticking in it. A couple of different nails. There's one. That's probably why this had a slow leak. But the tires are in rough shape too. Really low mile car. So I think for the last couple of years or so, I probably just sat most of the time. We got a little bit of this dry rot stuff going on, so I just couldn't run these tires much longer at all.
The fat tires of the Grand Sport, and being a Corvette, you want a decent tire, and they can get expensive rather quickly. I decided after some research, and based on the fact that we live here in South Carolina and winters are quite mild and you can literally drive all year round in a Corvette, I went with a Yokohama Advan Apex. I felt like it was a great bang for the buck.
Okay, feel them now. Just get all up in there. I mean, you can just tell. Like, that's the other ones felt like
tire.
The other ones. I like that laugh. I mean,
seems right to me. Rubber.
They should last us at least 5,000 miles.
And with plans for changing the wheels down the road, I didn't want to invest in a really high-end performance tire, not knowing what my tire specs would be. The Grand Sport takes 295s up front and 325s in the rear, so they are fatties and they can get expensive very, very fast. The reviews all said that they hook quite well laterally and in straight lines, and that seemed to be just what the Corvette needed. Once installed, the difference was night and day. Again, they are a sub 300 tread wear tire, so longevity is not really known at this point, but I was super happy with how they felt getting them on the road. They felt soft, they rode really nice, and they're actually quite quiet, and they were able to hook even in less than perfect conditions on the road. So totally happy with the Yokohama Advan Apex. Even if I were to change the wheels out, this might be a tire I would explore again down the road. Once each of these issues was addressed in the Corvette, I felt much more comfortable driving that car in the manner that it is meant to be driven. It feels so good, it runs great, sounds fantastic, hooks and books, and it's just a joy to drive, and I drove it every single day for about a year. No complaints about that thing whatsoever. Love it, miss it every single day, and I have an itch. I have an itch to get another C6 Corvette because of it. If you're interested, there are videos dedicated to each one of these topics on this list today, so go check out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate the continued support, guys. There's more stuff coming for Speed Culture Studios, so I hope you stick around. We'll see you in the next one.